Good evening, and welcome to the Motzi Shabbos, Moleva Malka pizza, beer, and French fries bonus, right? Edition of the Daf Yomi. We are sponsored tonight, the Moleva Malka is sponsored tonight by Yishai and Rebecca Schwartz. Shkoyach. Le'ili Nishmas, Rebecca's grandfather, Mr. Eli Yanku. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yep.
That's correct. Okay. Eliyahu ben Yaakov Verivka, whose yort side is coming Motzi Shabbos, the 21st of Shvat, Mezun Shama and Leah. And thank you especially to Mrs. Schwartz for making Yishai come. We really appreciate that. His presence, that's correct.
Come to that.
And all of our wives for making us come. That's right. All of our wives for making us come because we become better people. And we get to start a fresh Mishnah tonight. Very top of Chav Hey Amud Aleph Masnis in the Mishnah says, Nitma hakometz. Okay, so we've been talking, just for everybody jumping in, right? You have your korban mincha, which has got flour, it's got oil, it's got some frankincense perhaps, and you are going to come as a kohen and put your hand into it and take a scoop out. That's called your kemitza. So let's say the kemitza becomes tameh. Right, something that is impure touches it, vehikrivu, and now you're going to, and you bring it anyway, and you burn it on the mizbeach. What happens? Hatzitz miratza. We bring the tzitz up again. The kohen has eight garments, right? And the regular kohen has 4 garments. The regular kohen has got pants, he's got a tunic, he's got a belt, and he's got a hat. The kohen gadol adds an apron that he wears, a choshen mishpat, and he ties his hat a little bit differently. He has a me'il that goes on top, and he also has this tzitz that goes across. The tzitz is a gold plate that goes from ear to ear, wraps around the head, ties over the turban, which is on top. It's the last garment to go on. It goes over the top, and it says Kodesh LaHashem on it. How it is written, Kodesh LaHashem, subject to many, many discussions. You don't want to put the word LaHashem on the second line because you put Hashem first. So is it written with, the Rambam says 2 lines, LaHashem above and then Kodesh underneath. So it looks like, when you're driving down the street and it says slow down or whatever it is, so the word slow is below. It's like Kodesh LaHashem, so you're looking up, and you have to look up at the Kodesh. Or it's Kodesh and the word LaHashem is up here, whichever we're reading about. Anyway, that's what's written on this tzitz. Every garment we had learned has a mitzvah, has something that it helps for. We learned that in Masechet Zvachim. And the tzitz helps helps with the sin of tumah. If something is tameh and it is brought as a korban, so as we see here again, if the kemitza becomes tameh, the tzitz is going to help out. Does the tzitz help out only when the kohen is wearing it, or only when or even when the kohen gadol is not wearing it? Subject to conversation and dispute as well. Not here, but specifically, we'll get into it in Maseches Yoma when we discuss with the
Things are tummy, right?
Sorry?
This help things are tummy, right?
That's correct. Helps accept the korban if the korban is tameh. In an individual, we had said when it comes to a community offerings, tumah hutra b'tzibor, tumah becomes permissible in a community setting in any event. So this is specifically for an individual's korban. So an individual korban. And Rashi points out the shirayim ne'echolin, the leftovers, the rest of it can be eaten. The korban is valid; it counts for the owner, and the rest of it can be eaten. Yatsa vehikrivu. Now we have another thing that can happen bad to a korban. Let's say it goes outside of the azara, right? If you take this kemitza and you walk out of the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash, so you're not allowed to take offerings outside of the Beis Hamikdash area of the courtyard area. So if you do that, vehikrivu, and then you bring it, ein hatzitz miratza. That the tzitz can't help you with. Because hatzitz miratza al tameh, veino miratza al yotze, tzitz is specifically helpful when it comes to tumah. Tzitz is not helpful when it comes to things leaving the courtyard, right? It only has certain powers. Says the Gemara, Tanu Rabbanan, so let's figure out what the source, where do we see that the tzitz allows that? So, V'nasa Aaron es avon hakodashim. The pasuk says that Aaron puts on the tzitz, right? V'haya al meitzach Aaron, the pasuk starts, it's on his forehead. V'nasa Aaron es avon hakodashim, and the Aaron will be able to bear the sin of the holiness. That's what it says, the sin of the holiness. Now, we don't know which sin that is, right? Basically, there's some kind of, the pasuk just says, some kind of disqualification that the tzitz is going to make acceptable. So, sorry, I'm going to say it, right? Im tomar avon pigel, What about the sin of pickle, right? It's going to keep on. What about if the Kohen had in mind that he's going to eat it? Well, I'm going to mention it quickly. What if the Kohen has in mind when he's slaughtering the sacrifice, he's bringing this, or not slaughtering it here, he's taking his kmitza, he has in mind that he's going to consume this offering beyond the right time, right? You only have a day to consume the sacrifice. He says, I'll eat it next Thursday, right? So that would be pickle. So maybe the tzitz helps, and now the korban is acceptable. Hare kvar namar, the pasuk already says, lo yechashev. It says very clearly that when it comes to pickle, it will not be considered acceptable. So the Torah says there's no way that that's coming back. So that's not the avera. Okay, so we're going to go through a list. What the Gemara is going to do now is a list of potential, it's a good way to review anyway, a list of potential things that can ruin a sacrifice, and then we're going to see that they can't be the sin. So by process of elimination, we're only going to be left with one sin left, which the tzitz can actually help us with. So im tomar avon nosar, what about the prohibition of nosar? Nosar is when we leave a sacrifice beyond its proper time. So the next morning, after the korban was supposed to be eaten that day and potentially and that night as well, and then we wake up the next day, it's supposed to be burnt. If you eat that korban the next day, it's nosar. So maybe tzitz helps you with nosar. So the answer is hakarei kvar nemar. The pasuk already says lo yeratzeh. When the pasuk by nosar says it will not be acceptable. So if we know that's not the one that's going to help. Ha eno nosei el avon tuma. So the only one left, right? Because we've had this as a group. We've had many mishnayos. We've had as a group tuma, pigel, and nosar. That comes kind of as a group together. So we know it's not pigel. We know it's not nosar. Must be tuma. That's the one. Shehutra miklala bitzibur. And not only that, but there's another thing. And that is that there's a circumstance where we already know that tuma is acceptable. In other words, if the tzitz is going to permit something, it makes sense that it's going to permit something that has been permitted in another circumstance. When was tuma permitted? In a community sacrifice. We said, if you have a community sacrifice and the kohen is tameh or the offering becomes tameh, impure in some way, you can still offer it. Okay, so now, maskif lo Rabbi Zir. Rabbi Zir says, that's fine, but you have not explored all possibilities. Ema avon yotze. What about the sin that the Mishnah brings up, going outside of the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash? What about that one? Shehutar mikol b'bama. That is acceptable in some circumstances. Like, for example, we don't have a problem of bringing the korban outside of the courtyard when we have bamos. Right? When we have individual korbanos, obviously an individual, and when we have this bama, that's everybody was allowed to have their own altar. So if you had an altar in your backyard, there was no issue of bringing it outside of anywhere because you could bring it anywhere. So Amar le Abaye, so Abaye says Amar Kra, the pasuk says Leroton lahem lifnei Hashem. So it says it will come. This pasuk is by the tzitz, and it says that it's coming to permit that which is a korban which is being offered before Hashem. So avon delifnei Hashem in avon deyotze lo. That means that whatever sin this is, it's a sin that happens before Hashem. Yotze is the opposite. Yotze is a disqualification that happens by leaving Hashem, taking it away. So it's tuma. It's got to be tuma. Okay. Maskif la Rabbi Law. So Rabbi Law comes along. He says ema avon small. What about another sin? What about bringing the sacrifice with your left hand? We had said that all offerings have to be done with your right hand.
Not valid.
Otherwise, you do it with your left hand, it's not valid. And we also know that there is a circumstance where you can use your left hand, right? Remember, what's the one? By Yom Kippur, Shehutar mikol b'Yom HaKippur. And we know that on Yom Kippur, that there is a difficult service that the Kohen has to bring incense and coals, hot coals, into the Kodesh HaKodashim. He has two hands. So therefore, he can use with his right hand, he takes the shovel that has the hot coals. And in his left hand, he has the shovel that has the incense. So he takes both shovels in, he's using his left hand. So we see that you can use your left hand. So not only is it mutter, but discussions the Mefarshim wonder, what if this Kohen decides he wants to flip it? Let's say he wants to bring the Torah in his right hand and the coals in his left hand. I know that the Torah says that you should do it in his right hand. Maybe that's because he's stronger in his right hand, the coals are heavier. But what if he decides he wants to do it the other way around?
I thought it should be invalid.
Might be problematic. It might be problematic. The Torah tells you this is the way that you do it. So not only is the left hand acceptable, the left hand has to be used this way, right? So now, Amar le Abaye, so Abaye says, I'll tell you why that's not the one that tzitz helps. Because Amar Kra, the pasuk says, Avon, it says a sin. Avon shehaya bo udechisiv. It has to be something that there was a sin, right, and it got pushed away. Lafuke Yom Kippurim dechshiru b'smol. But that's not what's happening on Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, that's the mitzvah, right? In other words, all of these Tuma, it's an invalidating factor. But because it's done in the community, we can do it anyway. When you're talking about left-handed, that's the mitzvah. It's not wrong at all. You did it 100% valid. So therefore, how can you compare? Left-handed is not an invalidation. Therefore, to tell me that when you actually invalidated the sacrifice with your left hand, it should be accepted by the tzitz, it's not comparable because this is not an invalidation at all. So Ravashi says, what about this one? Avon hakadoshim velo avon hamakdishin. The other point is that the tzitz helps to validate an invalid offering, not an invalidation of the person, right? And that's a big difference, right? The tzitz comes, as it says, that the pasuk of the tzitz, v'nasonas avon hakadashim, it's helping some invalidation of the sacrifice. The left hand is not an invalidation of the sacrifice. The left hand is an invalidation of the person. He's doing the sacrifice wrong. Therefore, he invalidates the sacrifice, but it's not an invalidation, it's not the problem with the sacrifice per se. Amalei Rav Sima Breder Rav Idi l'Ravashi. So Rav Sima, the son of Rav Idi, says to Ravashi, "V'amri lo Rav Sima Breder Rav Ashi l'Ravashi." Some say it was Rav Sima was the son of Ravashi, said to Ravashi, which is interesting. His son was telling him. What about ve'ema avon balmum? What about the sin of somebody who has a blemish? Right, somebody who has a blemish who services. Shehuter miklolo be'ofos. We know that that's not a problem. Blemishes. So we know that not a person who's a blemish, but the sacrifice has a blemish, right? We don't want to say the person is a blemish because that will come up to the same answer we had just before, right? It's the sacrifice is a problem, not the person. What if the sacrifice is a blemish? Maybe the tzitz is going to help us accept a sacrifice that has a blemish on it. Where do we see blemishes that are acceptable? Birds, right? Birds are only not acceptable if they're missing a limb. If they just have a little blemish on it, right? Clipped wing or some kind of something in its eye, that's not going to invalidate a bird. De Amar Mar, as Mar said, Tamus v'zachrus bebehema ve'ein tamus v'zachrus be'ofos. You only have to worry about male animals, female animals. That's an issue by birds and blemishes. By animals, and blemish is also only an issue by animals. So you don't have to worry about that by birds. Amar lei, so he said to him, Alecha makra. That's why the pasuk says lo yeratzeh. The pasuk specifically says about blemishes. That they are not accepted. They will not be an acceptable something for you. They will not be considered an acceptable sacrifice for you. So therefore, the balmum, specifically an animal that's blemished, is specifically told. Okay, now Tosfos goes in and says we have a whole bunch of other different invalidations nobody even asks about, right? And he goes through and answers all of those. So any other type of invalidation that you were thinking about, let's say. No, he doesn't bring them here. I might have seen them someplace else. Anyway, he says basically any of the other invalidations that you might have had before, they're going to fall into the answers are going to fall into the same categories as we've listed already. So bottom line is the tzitz. It says it helps an avera. Which avera is it going to be? It's going to be tuma. Tana Rabbanan Rabbi's word. Dam shenitma v'zarku b'shogeg. So let's say you have blood that became tameh, and then you threw it. And you do so b'shogeg, okay? That you didn't know that there was a problem with it. Okay, now there's two ways that we're going to see, different ways for something to be shogeg. Either I didn't know the blood was tameh, or I didn't know that tameh blood was a problem. So hurtza, then that's going to be accepted, right? Because the tzitz is going to help us out with that one. So it's b'shogeg. B'mezid, now the kohen knows it's tameh and he knows it's wrong. Lo hurtza, that's not going to work. Can't use that blood. That's not going to work. But medvar memurim, when do we say that? B'yachid. That's by an individual. Aval betzibor, but when it comes to the community offering, as he said, bein b'shogeg, bein b'mezid, hurtza. Doesn't matter whether you did it on purpose, not on purpose. Tuma is pushed off by tzibor. Tzibor, go ahead and do it anyway. Ube'ove kochavim. Now, interestingly, if a idol worshiper, right, he sends his korban, he's allowed to send korbanos to the Beis HaMikdash, and so he's not doing it himself, but he's sending it to the Beis HaMikdash to be done. Bein b'shogeg, bein b'mezid, bein b'ones, bein b'ratzon. It makes no difference whether it was shogeg, whether it was on purpose, right? What?
Sorry, I'm so confused. Shouldn't another Kohen tell the Kohen be watching to make sure he does it right? Like you tell me all of it, that would mean every Kohen out of the however many they are would have to be complicit in the
The question is, what is the, you have to start envisioning, what was the quality control that was going on there, right? It seems to me, I have the envision of a particular Kohen, somebody coming in saying, I got a korban, and then a Kohen goes over, I'll help you, and then they take him over here, and that Kohen and that guy are working. I don't know that it was a quality control system with a supervisor going over there and a whole group supervise. It was this guy, his individual korban. So it's this guy and a Kohen who came over to help him, right? I'm just, that's probably what it is. Not more than that. So yeah, he can make a mistake. So now, if it's an idol worshiper's Kohen, so then it doesn't matter, right? Whether it was b'shogeg or b'mezid or whether it was be'ones, means against his will, right? Or it was intentionally. All those circumstances, lo hurtza, then that's not going to work. It's puzzle, right? Because the tzitz only helps Jewish korbanos. Doesn't help an idol worshiper's korbanos. What did the pasuk say? The pasuk says, Avon HaKodashim. Well, he doesn't say it. Doesn't bring the whole pasuk. Okay, fine. We'll see why. Uraminhi, but here's a contradiction, because the Brisa says that as far as individual korbanos, it says, Alma tzitz meratze. How does the tzitz work? When is the tzitz going to help you? Al adam val habasar. Right. It's going to help if the blood becomes tameh. Also, if the meat becomes tameh. Also achelev. Also the fats that are burned on the mizbeach. Shenitma, in all those circumstances, that becomes tameh. Bein b'shogeg, bein b'mezid, whether they were done b'shogeg, whether it was done on purpose. Bein b'ones, bein b'ratzon, whether it was forced, whether against the will, or was intentional. Bein b'yachid, bein b'tzibor, whether it's individual or whether it's community, it makes no difference. So therefore, this brisa contradicts the last brisa. Last brisa told me that when it comes to individuals, it can only be brought b'shogeg. This one says even individuals, it can be brought even b'mezid intentionally. So Amar of Yosef, so Rav Yosef's lo kasha, it's not a contradiction. There's an argument on this point. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbanan is a machlokas between Rabbi Yossi and the Rabbanan D'Tanya. Here's a brisa that tells us this argument. Ein tormin min hatamei al hatohar. Right? When it comes to truma, you're not supposed to take truma from something which is tameh in order to cover if you've got something which is, I've got crops, and my crops here are tahor, and I've got crops here that are tameh. So what I say is, you know what? The truma over there, that's tameh, those crops over there, that will be the truma for these crops over here, resulting in that I've got truma that's tameh, and that limits the consumption that a Kohen is allowed to do, right? The Kohen can't eat that, right? He winds up being able to burn it for fuel, but he was not able to consume it. It's a loss to the Kohen. V'im toram b'shogeg, if he does it b'shogeg, let's say the guy didn't know that it became tameh. So then truma, then it works. B'mezid, but if he's doing it on purpose, and he's trying to give inferior truma, ain't truma is not work, does not work. That's what the Rabbanan say. There's a knas, basically, here. This is a rabbinic enactment to say, we don't want you cheating the Kohanim.
Is this where the knas charging comes from?
We know that the word knas doesn't come from here, but this is a usage of the word knas. Whenever we issue a penalty of some sort, we call it a knas, and that's how the word gets used.
People wake up and come late to yeshiva, or be late for shachas or whatever. They charge a knas or whatever.
That's correct, yes. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi says, bein b'shogeg, bein b'mezid, truma so truma. Rabbi Yossi says that it doesn't matter whether you did it on purpose, negligently, whatever it is. The truma is truma. Amar dishmasol Rabbi Yossi de lo konis. We see Rabbi Yossi says that the rabbis didn't enact any kind of penalty. They didn't say there was any kind of penalty. Demerata tzitz al achilos mishmas le. Yeah, but the problem is, I understand that Rabbi Yossi holds that way, but Rabbi Yossi doesn't allow you to consume the truma, to consume the korban. That brisa that we said allowed you to bring it when it was mezid or shogeg also says that the tzitz helps for the meat of a korban that's tameh. And Rabbi Yossi doesn't agree with that. Rabbi Yossi says the burned parts that you can bring to the mizbeach. But he doesn't say that it means that a person is allowed to consume, is allowed to eat the tameh korban that's left, the meat. V'hatanya, we're going to brisa. Rabbi Eliezer says, hatzitz meratze al achilos. Rabbi Eliezer says that the tzitz allows you to even eat a korban that's tameh. Rabbi Yossi says, no, einat tzitz meratze al achilos. That the tzitz cannot help. If the meat is tameh, you can bring the korban, but then you got to burn it. You can't eat it. So The answer is, okay, we're stuck, but epoch, let's reverse it. Let's make it so that Rabbi Eliezer says, Omer ein hatzitz meratza al achilos, that Rabbi Eliezer says you can't eat it, and Rabbi Yossi Omer tzitz meratza al achilos, and Rabbi Yossi says you can. Now that we've said Rabbi Yossi holds that you can eat it, and Rabbi Yossi says there's no knas, the second brisa can be Rabbi Yossi's opinion. Maskif la Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes says, yeah, but I've got a problem with you flipping it. You can't just flip that. V'hatanya, we learn our brisa. Yachol basar shenitma lifnei zrikas damim yehu chayavin alei mishum tuma. You might think that, let's say I've got meat, I've got a korban, and I have meat that becomes tameh, and I have not yet thrown the blood for that korban. So I might think that if I eat that, I might be in violation of tuma, of eating tameh. Tamad lomar. Therefore, the pasuk says, "Kol tahor yochal basar." Anybody who is pure can eat the meat. And somebody who eats the meat from the korban of Hashem, while he's tameh, he's going to get kares. Right? He gets cut off. He is not able to live full life and loses olam haba. Now, that means that only meat that is permissible to somebody who is tahor can be included in this prohibition. When is the meat permitted? And if it's not yet permitted to be eaten yet, there's no issue of eating it betuma, right? And before you throw the blood, nobody can eat it. So therefore, okay, so or do we say that if it can be consumed by somebody who's tahor, so then it is a violation of tumah, and if it cannot be consumed by somebody who's tahor, then it's not a prohibition of tumah. So otzi ani es halan ve'es hayotze she'eno nechol letahorim. So that would mean that I'm going to say meat that gets left over to the next day or leaves the azara. They cannot be eaten by tahorim, and therefore there would not be a problem of eating them when they're tameh. Talmud Lomer, the pasuk says, Asher LaHashem, which is for Hashem, Riba, which comes to include them. So Yachol Sha'ani Marabe Esa Pigulin, I might say, okay, you know what else I'm going to include? Also pigul, Vesha no soros, and anything that's left over to the next day. So no soros, hainu lon. What do you mean? No soros left over the next day? That's the same thing as leaving it over to the next day. El afa pigulin ken nosoros. We're going to say the pigulin should be just like the nosar, and I could bring it the next day. Talmud Lomar mizeva chashlamim. Therefore, the pasuk says that the prohibition is only from those things which are from a kosher korban. So that's miyot. That's a limiter. So which ones am I including as a prohibition for a tahor person to eat while he's tameh? I decided to include those things that are left over the next day and the yotze, but I'm not including pigul. So why did you decide to include which ones did you decide to include and which ones not? So the answer is achar shariba kosef miyot. Once the pasuk included something and it excluded something, amart miraba ani as elu shahaisalim shasa kosher. I will include those things like the ones that leave the courtyard and the ones that are left over, which were at one point kosher. They were kosher at one point, and then they became no good. So those will still be prohibited for a tahor person to eat while they're tameh. Whereas pigul was invalid immediately. Okay, so now, Ve'im tomar, and if you will say, basar shenitma lifnei zrikas dam, here's the point of our question, after bringing all of that. Ve'im timsalomar, basar, the meat, shenitma, which becomes tameh, lifnei zrikas damim, before you throw the blood. Ve'achlu la'achar zrikas damim, and you're eating it after the blood was thrown. Mipnei ma chayavin alav, mishum tuma. Why would you be liable for eating it while you're tameh? Mipnei shatzitz miratzeh. Because the tzitz should be able to help you out, right? So, therefore, sorry, 1 second. Sorry, why would you be chayav for it because of tuma? And the brisa says mipnei shatzitz maratza, right? The throwing of the blood is acceptable, so it's considered as though the meat is tahor, right? And so now you can consume it, right? So therefore, now the Gemara is going to explain that Rabbi Eliezer holds that the tzitz, that Rabbi Eliezer has to be the opinion who holds that the tzitz is permitting the food. Because whose brisa was this? This whole thing was being stated in the name of, just go back, make sure it was Rabbi Eliezer, so if I'm right. Ella, this one, he didn't say Rabbi Eliezer's name in this. So nitma in yodse lo, 1 second. So this is, because he says that meat that was tameh, right? Then before that meat that was tameh before the zrika, and you eat it after the zrika, that is able to be eaten because that the tzitz is going to accept it, but meat which was yotze, the tzitz is not going to help. So that's the point. Here's where Rabbi Eliezer comes in. Man shmos lo de'amar ein zrika mo elas liyotze. Whose opinion was it that holds that the zrika is not going to help you?
Rabbi Eliezer.
That's Rabbi Eliezer, right? So this is Rabbi Eliezer. So this whole brisa is Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, right? We had learned before in a machlokas about whether the throwing of the blood while the meat was outside, whether that was going to validate the meat that remains inside. Is that acceptable or not? We found out that was Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. So if that's Rabbi Eliezer, then this whole brisa is Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. And this is the point, we ran through it quickly, but here's the point of the whole story, which is the Ketani, the point of this brisa, bringing this whole brisa, is the meratza tzitz ala chilos, that this brisa holds that once the tzitz is accepting the korban, you can consume the rest of the meat. And this is Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. So now, we want to get so many steps deep, but let's summarize where we got to so far, right? We have this brisa that tells us that you can consume a korban, despite the fact that it became tameh before the blood was thrown. Once you've thrown the blood, then you can consume the meat. That was Rabbi Eliezer, who allows you to consume the meat. Therefore, we cannot flip a brisa that we wanted to flip before about being able to eat or not eat when we were talking about truma. Rabbi Eliezer is the one who says that you can eat. He must be holy. Rabbi Eliezer is the one who holds that you can eat. And Rabbi Yossi is the one who says that you cannot eat based on the tzitz. Which means that we go back one more brisa, and the brisa that we had brought that says that the tzitz is making acceptable the shogeg and the mazid, and it doesn't matter. We said that could be Rabbi Yossi's opinion, right? And therefore, it doesn't conflict with the first brisa, which is the Rabban's opinion, except that brisa can't be Rabbi Yossi's opinion, because that brisa also says that you're not allowed to eat it. That says that you are allowed to eat it, and Rabbi Yossi says you can't. So therefore, that second brisa can't be Rabbi Yossi. So that's the whole reason we brought this whole long thing, is to be able to prove that we have these two brises. The original question was, one brisa says that if you throw the blood for an individual's korban, the tzitz helps you, even if it's on purpose or by accident, it doesn't matter. And the other one said, only if you do it by accident. And we said, that's a contradiction. We said, one's Rabbi Yossi's opinion. Well, it turns out it can't be Rabbi Yossi's opinion. And that's our point. Ella, so we've got to go back to the two brisos, the original brisos. Ella Amar Rav Chisda. So Rav Chisda says, okay, it's not an argument between Rabbi Yossi and the Rabbanan. Scratch all that. We've got to explain why it is that one brisa says that when an individual, I can throw the blood, that's tameh, and one says I can't. Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbanan, it's an argument between Rabbi Eliezer and the rabbis, right? So that's Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, who says, right, that Rabbi Eliezer is the one who disagrees with Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Eliezer holds that there is such a knas. So okay, Amar deshmosli Rabbi Eliezer demeratza tzitz alachilos de lo konis mishmas lei. 1 second. We understand that Rabbi Eliezer is the one, he holds, to allow you to consume meat, right? That from a korban which is tameh. That we saw in that big long brisa that we ran through too quickly. But that's where we learned from. That's where we see how Rabbi Eliezer holds that way. But we never saw that Rabbi Eliezer also holds of the knas idea, right? Where Rabbi Eliezer holds, right? That so we can't say this. He doesn't. We don't hold that. We don't know that he doesn't make a knas. Meaning maybe he holds that you can consume the meat, but if you do it on purpose, who says that he allows that? right? We don't have a proof to that. The answer is in. No, we do know that. Why? How do you know that? He holds that the Rabbanan didn't make any sort of punishment, therefore he allows you to do it on purpose. Ki hechi d'shmas lo the Rabbi Yossi, because we know that Rabbi Yossi holds that way. Rabbi Yossi says that he doesn't make any sort of knas when we learn by the Truma, and shmas le Rabbi Eliezer. So we know also Rabbi Eliezer holds that way. Tanya, we're in a brayso. Rabbi Eliezer Omer bein b'shogeg bein b'mezid truma so truma. He also agrees that the truma is fine, despite the fact that he intentionally took truma that was tameh to take care of his crops that were tahor. Didn't bother us. Okay, so now we've decided that the brisa that allows the meat to be eaten and also doesn't punish the person, the kohen, for for throwing the blood, even if it was bemazed, and you could still have the rest of the sacrifice. That's all Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. Now, Amar Dishmas.
Is it outside the time or during its time?
Outside of what time or during what time? What do you mean?
When the current goes put the.
This has to be all the rest of the korban is being done properly, right?
Yeah.
Time can't be the issue. Only the tzitz is only going to help us with the tumah, right? If any other problem happens, that's not going to help us. Okay, so
the case here is that the person that's bringing the korban.
The korban became tameh.
A tameh korban.
But the korban became tameh.
Who's offering it knows that it's a
Exactly.
tameh.
He knows that it's tameh, and he's throwing the blood anyway, right? Okay, so now, Amar dishmas Rabbi Eliezer betruma dekila bekadrim dechamir mishmasle. Fine. We know that though that Rabbi Eliezer holds this way, that the Rabbanan made no extra rules to prohibit it. We only know that by truma. Truma is more lenient than sacrifices. Maybe it would be prohibited. Maybe we don't know that he doesn't say that that there's a prohibition by sacrifices. Maybe the rabbis would say, look, if you're a Kohen and you're doing it wrong, we'll punish you even though the sacrifice could be valid based on the tzitz by itself. We're not going to accept it. No. Im Kain, if that were true, ha aman tirmiyeh. Well, if that's the case, then we're stuck. We're literally ran out of people. Rabbanan have to argue. It has to be somebody's opinion. It's not the Rabbanan's opinion. It's not Rabbi Yossi's opinion. If it's not Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, then whose is it? Makes sense. Let's leave it as Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. Okay? So basically, we don't know that Rabbi Eliezer holds that way, but he's our last option, so therefore it's probably him. Ravina Amar, Rabbi Eliezer said...
Can I ask?
Yes.
By Tanaim, when we're looking for which Tana was this, which Tana was that, there are more than 3 Tanaim out there. So
yes.
So
we have no place else where we've got anybody else quoted related to this story.
Wow.
Right? That's the issue that we're having. If we had another brisa out there that would quote that we would have said holds something to do with a knas of tuma or the or bemazid or b'shogeg, then it would help us.
But we don't say that. Oh, it's possible that it's another Tana that
because if that
was lost.
If somebody else existed, then theoretically, the Rabbanan would have said this. Well, then where were they in the brisas that quoted? Right? Well, if you have a brisa that says the Rabbanan say this and Rabbi Eliezer says this, great. Where's that other opinion? Where was he? He wasn't in the base medrash that time. He didn't raise his hand and say, "I also agree with Rabbi Eliezer." Nobody else said anything. The Rabbanan said this, Rabbi Eliezer said, "No, I disagree," and they recorded that. The Rabbanan said this, Rabbi Yossi said that. So somehow he got through all this. Somebody else was out there who was disagreeing all this time, and he was like, "I disagree." He's in the back, and nobody paid attention, and nobody wrote it down. Like, I also disagreed. Like that would be like. So we presume that that's not the case, right? So it makes more sense, especially we don't. Also in this case, this is unique. Like can't think of any other time in the Gemara where we say like we don't have a proof that Rabbi Eliezer holds this way, but if he doesn't hold this way, we're stuck. So we have to choose Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. Yeah, this is unique that way, but it's not that terrible because it's not like we see from any place that Rabbi Eliezer doesn't say that. And we did presume that it would be consistent. All of a sudden you raised the issue and you said, you know what, how do you know that Truma and Kachim have the same rules? Well, that's true. It doesn't have to. That's fair. We know that they don't have the same rules by Tuma itself, right? Truma can only have 3 levels of Tuma, and Kachim is stricter. It has 4 levels of Tuma. So even within the concept of Tuma, we know that Kachim can be more strict. So that's a fair question, but we don't know that's a problem. Like we've never seen anywhere that is a problem. It's okay, so keep it simple and we'll presume it to be okay. I won't disagree with you that it is unique. That's why the Gemara says it that way, right? It is unique. Ravina says, no, I'll give you another answer, right? Tuma so, there's a difference between what kind of tuma we're talking about. That's the explanation of two brises. So now we have an alternate explanation, right? Right? Bein b'shogeg, bein b'mezid hurtza, right? When we say that what we mean is that when it became b'shogeg and b'mezid, the brise is saying whether the blood or the meat became tameh, b'shogeg or mezid, then it's acceptable because zrika so b'shogeg hurtza korban. Because as long as when the Kohen threw it, who cares how it became tameh? Meaning, somebody maliciously came in and made the korban tameh, but the Kohen didn't know that, so he took it and he threw it negligently. Then the korban's okay, because he's saying one Mishnah that says it doesn't matter. It matters. That's talking about the knowledge of the Kohen. The Mishnah, the brisa that says that it doesn't matter, is talking about how it became tameh.
If you throw the korban and it causes a mum, that can make it tummy itself.
We're not throwing the korban, throwing the blood, right? The blood of the korban. Yeah, throw the korban, it can make a mum, yes. You don't throw animals. My mother always said, don't throw animals in the house. Okay.
Wisely.
That's right. So he says, but zrika, so when the Kohen's coming to throw the blood, so then b'shogeg hurtza, it has to be that he threw the blood. His action, the Kohen's action has to be b'shogeg. B'mezid lo hurtza. But if he knows that it's tameh, and again, it doesn't matter how it became tameh. It became tameh accidentally, but the Kohen says, yeah, but I don't care, I'm throwing it anyway. That is when it's not going to be okay. It is all dependent. So he makes the distinction in the brisa. The brisa that says it matters what the Kohen's intention is. It doesn't matter how it became tameh in the first place. So that's a good answer. Rav Shila says, actually, it's the exact opposite. Zurika, so the throwing, and it's a little bit struggle to try to figure out exactly why this logically would make sense, but we'll present it. Zurika, so throwing it, bein b'shogeg, bein b'mezid hurtza. It doesn't matter what the Kohen's intention was when he threw it, right? Either way, he throws it, it's going to be acceptable. Tuma, so b'shogeg hurtza, b'mezid lo hurtza. It matters how it became tameh. Right? Now, why that should be, that's a little bit of a struggle, right? I can't say that that's the most logical thing, right? But it seems that if it became tameh in a way that somebody was doing it purposefully, then the Rabbanan came along and said, well, now we've got to, make this offering more difficult to be brought. Can't bring this anymore, right? So that way we prevent people from invalidating offerings on purpose, it would seem. But if the offering became invalid unintentionally, then we tell the Kohen, whatever you want, go ahead and do it. Now, Rav Shila, ha-dekatani, shenitma bein b'shogeg bein b'mezid, right? Now, the problem is that Rav Shila, when he sees the brisa, the second brisa that we had, and he says that if it became tameh on purpose or negligently, so sounds like it became tameh purposely or negligently, he's saying, no, it has to become tameh on purpose, negligently to be acceptable. Can't be done on purpose. So how does he understand the brisa, which says nitma, that it became tameh? So he says nitma b'shogeg zarku bein b'shogeg means. You're right. You have to alter the text. It became tameh b'shogeg. Then the Kohen goes and throws it, and it's fine. Okay. Toshma, come and listen. One last little thing. Dam shenitma uzrako. If the blood became tameh and then you threw it b'shogeg hurtza, if he throws it b'shogeg, and then it's acceptable. B'mezid lo hurtza. If it's b'mezid, it's not acceptable. So then that seems to be that the issue is not like Reb Shila again. That the issue is the throwing. So no, we have to change that too. Hachi kamar, we want to change it again. Dam shenitma, the blood becomes tameh uzrako, and then you threw it. Bein b'shogeg bein b'mezid, does not matter whether you threw it shogeg or mezid. Nitma b'shogeg hurtza, as long as it became tameh b'shogeg, then it's acceptable b'mezid lo hurtza. So you have to again do a little bit of gymnastics to be able to flip the words in. Rav Shila had to be sure of his opinion because he's got to change the texts of a couple of brisas in order to make it fit, which we don't love doing, but we haven't been opposed to doing. Okay, next Mishnah. Nitma'u shiyareha. Let's say now we've got the mincha, so we've done the kmitza. We talked about what happens if the kmitza becomes tameh. After you take the kmitza out, you've got all the rest that's left there. You're going to burn this kmitza. The rest is going to be edible in most korban cases. Sometimes if there are kohen's korban, it gets burnt, whatever. But we say the leftovers of the regular korban is supposed to be eaten. Let's say that part becomes tameh. Nisrafu shiara, or it becomes burnt up. Avdu shiara, you lose it. Kemidas Rabbi Eliezer. So then, according to, we had this argument in Zvachim, If you recall, when we discussed what happens if you've got an animal, you've slaughtered the animal, you catch the blood, you're about to do the blood, and you lose the rest of the animal. The rest of the animal becomes tummy before you throw the blood. Can you still throw the blood despite that you've got no korban left to be throwing the blood for? So according to Rabbi Eliezer, he says, yes, you can throw the blood even though there's no meat. So according to Rabbi Eliezer, kshera, you're fine. Throw the kmitza. You don't need the rest of the korban there. Ukamidas Rabbi Yeshua, but Rabbi Yeshua says, no, you can't. So it's psula. Same argument. So, says the Gemara. Amar Rav Huna, so Rav Huna says, Shenitmu kol shiareha. What has to happen is all of the leftovers have to become tummy, right? You can't, if you have something left over, like we had by the animal, as long as a kazayas was left over to eat, then you could keep doing your sacrifice. Aval, miktzas shiareha, if some of it becomes invalid, lo, not so. Now, kasalka daitach, I would have thought, nitma in avud v'sarif lo. That we thought that what Rav was saying was that this was a rule by Tuma. But when it comes to losing it or burning it, that he doesn't agree with that, which means that he holds that when it comes to burning, as long as you burn it or destroy any amount of the leftovers, the entire korban is no good. Tuma, okay, some of it comes to tummy, but it still exists. Therefore, you can finish the sacrifice. So, my kasavar. So let's figure out, why would he make any kind of distinction? Why does it matter between it becoming tameh or being destroyed? Why is it that when it comes to tuma, you have to make the whole thing tameh, but when it's destroyed, even destroying a little bit of it would ruin it? Why should that be? Ika savar shiura milsehu, if he holds, after all, that leaving over any part of it is acceptable, so if he love of it sarf nami, then why should it make a difference in the case where he destroyed it or burned it? Some of it's left over, it should be fine. If he says any leftover piece after some of it is destroyed is not going to help you bring the korban, then nitma, so nitma, my taima, why would the tuma be acceptable? So you'd have to say dimirat tzitz. The tzitz is going to help you, right? You've got some left over, it's acceptable. The tuma is going to help. Well, okay, well then ihaki, if that's true, if the tzitz is stepping in here, kol shiranami, then let the whole thing become tameh. What difference does it make? The tzitz can help the whole thing. So rather, liolam, here's what he holds. Shiura milsein, any leftover bit is significant. And therefore he holds that even if you burn some of it or you lose some of it, as long as anything is left, the korban is still fine and you can still bring it. Why did he talk about tuma? V'nitma v'hu hadin la'avud sarvit. Doesn't he? He was just using it as an example. Remember, we said tuma, avud, and tuma, it's just tuma, lost, burned, all is an example. V'aydekamar nitma, reishaihu naka. The only reason he said the word nitma is because that is when the pasuk gives, when the Mishnah gives a list of potential things that could destroy a korban. Tuma is the first one, right? So therefore, Tuma was the one that he mentioned, but it's the same rule by losing anything. As long as some of it's left over, you're okay. But if you destroy all of it, no good. Kidatanya, we learned this in a brayso. Rabbi Shua says, Kol hazvachim shebat Torah, any korban that's in the Torah, shenishtayr mehen kazayis basar, as long as one kazayis of the animal is left, or kazayis chilev, or one kazayis of the fats, which are going to be burned on the mizbeach, Zorek Asadam, you can go ahead and throw the blood, and the sacrifice is still valid. Doesn't matter how much of it you lost. You need to have one kazayas left, and you're fine. Kachatzi zayis basar, kachatzi zayis chayav. Incidentally, if you've only got half of an olive's portion of the meat, half an olive's portion of the fats, Eino Zorek Asadam, that you can't throw the blood on. Why? Because half of it is for eating, one half of it is for burning. Those are two different things. You can't combine those together. However, ube'ola, and when it comes to the korban ola, where you're going to burn everything, you burn the meat and the fats. So then afilu v'chatzi zayis basar v'chatzi zayis chalav zorek dam. Then if you've got half and half, you can. Why? Because it's all can combine together because it's all going to be burnt. Mipnei shekula kol, everything's going to be burnt. Now when it comes to mincha, what are we expecting it to say? We're going to say by the mincha a kazayis also, right? Mincha afilu kula kayames lo yizrok. Even if the entire thing's still there, you still can't throw the blood. Now, problem is, what are we talking about? Mincha ma'avidate. What are we talking about? A mincha? There's no blood of a mincha offering. What do you mean you can't throw? You can throw the blood of any of the minchas. There's no blood in a mincha offering. Amar Rav Papa. Rav Papa's talking. I'll tell you what mincha we're talking about in that statement. Minchas nesachim. We're talking about the mincha that comes together with an animal korban. When you bring an animal, you've got to bring a mincha together with it. That mincha is completely burnt. Even if you lose the entire animal, then you can't throw the blood on the animal, despite the fact you say, wait, I've got this whole mincha offering sitting here that was part of that animal sacrifice. That mincha offering doesn't help you. Once the animal is, you need part of the meat, you need part of the fats that are burned in order to throw that blood. The mincha offering that goes with it doesn't help you. Because Salkadaitach, would have thought, this mincha is part of the offering. I brought it. I only brought this mincha because I had to bring the animal. It's like being part of the animal. And the fact that I've got a kazayas of it left here, can't I throw the blood? Kamash will no, that's not the animal. It doesn't help you. Okay, minani mili. Okay, so where do we know this from? Where does this Bryson know that if you can't eat the meat and you've got chaylev left over, that you can still throw the blood? What meat? You think you have to eat something, right? How do I know? So Rabbi Yochanan, Mishum Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yochanan says Rabbi Shmuel, Umatu ba, and some people say Mishum Rabbi Yoshim in Chananya. There was the name of Rabbi Yoshim in Chananya. Amarkra, because the pasuk says, "V'yiktira chaylev l'reach nichoach l'Hashem." You have to burn the fats as a pleasant offering to Hashem. So that means chaylev v'afal pish ein basar. The fats also, the throwing of the blood doesn't just permit you to eat the korban; it also permits you to burn the fats. That's an element of the sacrifice. So therefore, as long as I have a kazayas of that left, that's also okay. Ve'ashkechon chaylev. So fine, I understand the fats because the pasuk says Viktir chaylev l'reach nichoach l'Hashem. The chaylev, I can burn that, but there's other parts that are all supposed to be burned on the mizbeach. Yoseres ushtei kloyos. The yoseres, if I'm not mistaken, is a membrane that goes around the liver, but we call it the diaphragm in the English, which is
the diaphragm are the two kidneys.
Right, the diaphragm. The diaphragm is the part of the animal that it helps inflate the lungs and deflate the lungs. Right, by creating a pressure by moving that muscle, it creates the pressure in the lungs to inhale and cause the air to come in. If I'm not mistaken in our anatomy, we'll get to Chul and we'll learn all about all of these things. But yeah, so this is what the Yoseres has, and the two, and those are also, and the two kidneys, those are supposed to also be burned on the mizbeach. So minotlan, how do I know if I've got those? They're not the chaylev. How do I know if I've got those? I can still throw the blood. Diktani, the pasuk says, uba mincha afilu kula kayemes lo yizrok. Even if you've got the entire mincha, you still can't. Mincha hu de lo yizrok. Because what he means is, even if you've got the entire mincha, you can't throw it. Ha yoser shtei kloyos yizrok. So he still is allowed to throw the blood, as long as he's got the kidney. So minotlan, where do we know that from? Yep.
The diaphragm and the kidneys are sacrificial parts, and we're normally offered together with the chaylev.
That's right. So, yes. So Rabbi Yochanan Dideyam, Rabbi Yochanan himself says, L'reach nichoach l'Hashem. It says in the pasuk not only the chaylev, but anything which is a pleasant burning to Hashem. Kol shat temal l'reach nichoach. Everything you put on the mizbeach to be burnt to Hashem, that is going to allow you to throw the blood. V'itztrich l'michtav chaylev, v'itztrich l'michtav l'reach nichoach. And that's why I need both of those things. I need to be able to write the fats, and I also need to write l'reach nichoach. Because of chaylev, if it only said the fats, havamina, chaylev in, yoser shtei kloyos lo. I would have thought that you need to have some of the fats left, not the kidneys and the diaphragm. Kasav rachmana, therefore the pasuk says reach nichoach to tell me even those parts. Because rachmana l'reach nichoach, the pasuk had only told me about l'reach nichoach, havamina, afilu mincha. I would have thought that the mincha is also burnt. So therefore, maybe the mincha is also included. Therefore, it says kasav rachmana chaylev. The pasuk says chaylev. Tell me it has to be part of the animal. So therefore, I know it has to be part of the animal that's burnt, and then I can throw the blood. Okay, that's the end of that section. We'll just got a couple more minutes. We'll go a drop further. Says the Mishnah, Shelo bikli shares pasel. If you take your kmitza, right, and you don't put it into a holy utensil, right, you got your scoop, then you got to take that scoop, you got to throw it into another utensil, right? If you don't throw it into a utensil, it's pasel. Rabbi Shimon machshir. Rabbi Shimon says, no, you don't have to. You can take the scoop, throw it right onto the mizbeach. Well, see what he holds. It's going to be three-way machlokas to determine what he holds. Hiktir kumtza pa'amayim. Let's say you burn the kmitza twice. How do you do that? You burn half of the kmitza, then you burn the other half of the kmitza. So kshera, then it's kosher. That's still okay. You can burn half and half. It's not considered to be invalid in that circumstance. Okay, we're going to see what that means. You have to have a kazayas, two ksesim, whatever. We'll discuss that. Amar Rabbi Yehuda brei Rabbi Chia. Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Rabbi Chia, says, my time at Rabbi Shimon. Why does Rabbi Shimon hold that you don't need to put it into a service utensil? Because Amar Kra, the pasuk says, Kodesh kadashem hi kachatas ka'asham. The kmitza becomes holy the mincha becomes holy, just like a chatos or just like an asham offering. Bal ovda biyad, so therefore you've got two choices. It can be like a chatos, it can be like an asham. Bal ovda biyad, if you decide that you're going to do the kmitza by hand, with no klishares, with no utensil, then it's like then ovda biyamin. Then you got to do it with your right hand, like a chatos offering. However, bekli, if you're gonna put it into a utensil, ovda bismol, then you can take the utensil and use your left hand and dump that into the fire, right? Just like we see ka'asham, just like by the asham, korban asham, we know that you can use your left hand, right? Because you're applying the blood to different right hands, left, and you can catch the blood with your left in your left hand. So therefore, we know that you can use the kli in your left hand. So you have a choice. That's what Rabbi Shmuel holds. Rabbi Yanai Amar. Rabbi Yanai says that's not what Rabbi Shimon holds. Rabbi Yanai says kevan shekmatzo klisharis ma'alehu umaktiro afilu behem yono va'afilu bekedera shocheres. He says no. You've got to put it in a utensil. And that's not what we had said before, right? The first opinion was you could either scoop it and put it directly into the fire with your right hand, or you could scoop and put it into your utensil with your left hand. But Rabbi Yanai says no. You have to scoop it. You got to put it into utensil. After you put it into the utensil, so you can do whatever you want with it, right? So then you could then dump it into your belt for all you care, right? Or you can put it into a earthenware utensil and dump it in. Once it's been sanctified, then it doesn't have to go directly from the special utensil into the fire. And Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak has a third opinion. Hakol modim bekometz shetoon kiddush. He says that everyone holds that you need to put the kmitza into the kli shares, but Rabbi Shimon says that after you do, then you can pick it up with your hand and bring it and put it on the mizbeach. You don't have to take it and dump it from the utensil. You can scoop it back up and put it in your hand afterwards again. Okay, we'll explain where everybody gets their opinion from and some sources in next time. Tomorrow. We might get to the menorah tomorrow.
Oh yeah?
The menorah comes in. Yeah, we've been waiting for us to get into topics. Well, you know what? Tomorrow I think we're going to talk about lulav. We're going to talk about the lulav tomorrow. Daf Chav Zayin talks about lulav. So if you can come back Sunday morning for exciting conversation. The question at hand, do you have to tie your lulav and esrog up together in a bundle, or can you just take them and just scoop them up? Why do you have to tie it into a bundle? That will be tomorrow. And then probably by Monday, we're going to go through in detail what the menorah looks like.
The spine, the adasim are like the eyes and the lips.
That is a nice a concept, but the psukim definitely don't say that any of like where all of that comes from and some of the connections and things. But the question is, if I pick up my lulav, hadasim, aravos, and my esrog, and I didn't tie them together, I just pick them up like this and I shake it, am I yotze?
Okay.
Goya, beautiful.
My teaser.
Sneak peek of tomorrow's
That's correct.